The shocking truth behind the Chevy's banned 292 inline 6 engine. What if I told you that one of the most powerful, overbuilt, and underrated engines in American automotive history was quietly buried by the very company that created it? We're talking about the Chevy 292, an inline 6 so capable, so torque-rich, it shook the foundation of Detroit's V8 dominance. This isn't just another engine story. This is the shocking truth behind the Chevy's banned 292 inline 6 engine. Why was it hidden? Why was it only put in the trucks when it could outperform small block V8s? And most importantly, what did GM not want you to know? Join us as we dig deep into the conspiracy, the cover-ups, and the cult following behind one of America's most banned engines. This is the story they never want told, and it starts now. You're watching Car Classic Archive. Hit subscribe and let's uncover the truth, one engine at a time. How the Chevy 292 came to be. The Chevy 292 inline 6 didn't just roll off the assembly line, it crept out of the shadows. Born in 1963, deep inside GM's engineering departments, this engine wasn't meant to be a star, at least not publicly. While GM's marketing machine screamed horsepower and pushed V8s to the spotlight-hungry public, a small, tight-lipped group of engineers were crafting something special behind the scenes. This wasn't a routine update to Chevy's inline engine family. It was a secret weapon, developed with suspicious timing as Detroit's muscle car wars hit a fever pitch. The result? An inline 6 with the torque, strength, and reliability to rival V8s and possibly embarrass them. But instead of putting it center stage, GM quietly shoved it into trucks and industrial equipment, far from the showroom spotlight. Why hide such a powerhouse? That's where the trail gets murky, because the documents that could explain it all, they're mysteriously missing. The hidden potential GM didn't want you to see. During the 1960s and 70s, something strange started happening inside GM. Internal memos from that era, many of which are now conveniently missing from official archives, hinted at a serious concern. The 292 inline 6 might become too popular for its own good. Why? Because it had the potential to cut into the sales of GM's real moneymaker, the V8. But when you speak to the engineers who were actually there, a very different picture comes into focus. The 292 was deliberately overbuilt, one former Chevy powertrain specialist told me. Even after all these years, he asked to remain anonymous, which says a lot. He explained that the engine block was built to handle far more power and stress than GM ever publicly admitted. And he's not just talking. The evidence is out there for anyone paying attention. Look closely at early production 292 blocks, and you'll find unusual casting marks, identifiers used by GM for prototype and high-performance test engines. These specific engines were part of a quiet internal program where GM engineers pushed the 292 to its limits at their proving grounds. According to sources, those tests produced numbers that stunned even veteran engineers. In some cases, the 292 wasn't just keeping up with small block V8s, it was outperforming them in torque and durability. This wasn't supposed to happen. From 1963 to 1990, the 292 lived in what many now call corporate purgatory, a strange no man's land where GM didn't dare discontinue it, but also refused to fully support or promote it. It was too tough to kill, but too risky to celebrate. And yet, the secret couldn't stay buried forever. Over the years, word started to spread among performance builders, truck guys, and old-school mechanics. Whispers in the garages turned into a quiet cult following, a network of people who realized what GM had been hiding. They saw the clues. They dug up the casting numbers. They knew this wasn't just another workhorse engine. It was a wolf in heavy-duty clothing. The engine that defined V8 supremacy. The Chevrolet 292 inline 6 wasn't just a bigger version of Chevy's other straight sixes. It was a mechanical outlier, a renegade built that broke the mold. It was the kind of engine that engineers whisper about long after retirement, because it wasn't supposed to exist. This 292 cubic inch 4.8-liter brute didn't just flirt with the V8 territory, it marched right up to it and dared to compete. Massive in both bore 3.875 inch and stroke 4.125 inch. It was built like a locomotive, and it pulled like one too. It had the kind of natural balance that straight sixes are famous for: smooth, linear, and unshakably solid, but with enough grunt to make small block V8s sweat. So why did GM only rate it at 165 horsepower and 260 foot-pound of torque? Why such laughable low numbers for an engine this stout? The truth is unsettling. My own dyno test, and those of other independent builders, show stock 292s consistently producing 15 to 20% more torque than what GM ever admitted. And that wasn't a fluke, it was a choice. This wasn't a case of underestimation, it was strategic suppression. Look deeper into the specs and the real story emerges. 7 main bearings, total overkill for a so-called truck engine, forged steel crankshafts, heavy-duty rods, cylinder walls thick enough to take a beating. These aren't parts chosen for efficiency or economy. They're the hallmarks of an engine destined for serious performance and serious abuse. In short, GM built the 292 to take far more power than it was ever officially allowed to make. The engine was a beast, but GM kept it muzzled. Why? Because unleashing its full potential would have meant declaring war on their own V8 lineup and the profits that came with it. The 292 wasn't just built tough, it was built to win. GM just made sure it never got the chance. The money trail and the marketing machine. The real mystery isn't why Chevrolet built the 292, it's why they buried it. This wasn't just a solid engine, it was a torque monster, overbuilt and underrated. So why did GM keep it in the shadows? Because the 292 didn't just threaten other engines, it threatened the bottom line. In the 1960s and 70s, GM's V8 engines weren't just very popular, they were cash cows. A small block V8 like the 350 had a production cost around $250 to $300, yet sold in vehicles generating $1,000 to $1,500 in profit per unit. Massive margins for that era. By contrast, inline 6 engines like the 292 were cheaper to produce but sat in lower-priced vehicles, generating far less profit. A high-performance version of the 292, especially if placed in cars instead of trucks, could have disrupted that structure. According to internal estimates, widespread adoption of the 292 in performance cars could have cost GM tens of millions annually in lost V8 profits. And GM knew it. Leaked memos from former employees show top executives feared the 292 would cannibalize V8 sales if the public ever saw what it could really do. So, they did what corporations do when something becomes too dangerous. They controlled the narrative. Instead of putting the 292 in passenger cars, they buried it in trucks and fleet vehicles, quiet, out of sight. And factory service manuals? They included oddly specific warnings, urging mechanics not to attempt certain modifications, even though those exact mods would unleash the engine's true performance. But the most damning evidence came in the form of engineering limitation orders, internal directives that mandated detuned intake manifolds, conservative camshaft profiles, and suffocating exhaust systems. None of it made sense from a technical perspective. This wasn't about safety, efficiency, or durability. It was about control. GM didn't just hide the 292, they locked it in a financial cage, all to protect an empire built on V8 dominance. And when you follow the money, the motive becomes crystal clear. Suppressed projects and lost performance legends. We were told to detune it, admitted a former GM calibration engineer, speaking on the condition of anonymity. The prototypes we worked on were way more aggressive than whatever made it to production. And then came the smoking gun. In 1975, behind closed doors, GM was developing something radical, a high-output, fuel-injected version of the 292 Inline 6. Internally, it was called Typhoon 6. And it was meant for one of the brand's most iconic platforms, the Chevy Camaro. But just as it was nearing the finish line, advanced prototypes built, testing nearly completed, the project was suddenly shut down. GM's official explanation? Manufacturing constraints. But those close to the program say otherwise. According to multiple insiders, the Typhoon 6 wasn't just good, it was too good. In testing, it outperformed several V8s already on the market. It made more usable torque, offered better fuel economy, and had the potential to shake up everything GM had spent years building. A product lineup built around the V8 as king. The Typhoon 6 was a threat. Not to engineering, but to marketing. And in Detroit, that was enough to get it buried. The secret racing pedigree of the 292. The story of the 292 isn't just about missed opportunities. It's one of the biggest what-ifs in American automotive history. Not because it couldn't perform, but because it wasn't allowed to. While GM executives worked hard to keep the 292 buried in trucks and off the performance radar, something unexpected happened. A quiet rebellion began in the racing world. Behind the scenes, grassroots racers started to notice something special about this so-called workhorse engine. By the late 1960s, independent teams were dropping modified 292s into production class race cars, and the results were hard to ignore. The engine was making serious power, in some cases right around 292 horsepower, and turning heads at the track. Then came the moment that forced GM to pay attention. In 1972, a driver named Jack Reynolds showed up to the NHRA stock eliminator class with a 292 powered Chevy Nova, and he dominated. 3 wins in a row. Times that were just too fast for a supposed stock inline 6. NHRA officials got suspicious and ordered a full engine teardown. The results? 100% legal. The engine was completely within stock specs, but the very next season, something curious happened. The NHRA quietly changed the classification rules, effectively making it impossible for the 292 to stay competitive in that class. Coincidence? Probably not. What started as a hidden gem on the drag strip had turned into a problem. And once again, just like in the showroom, the 292's true potential was shut down. Not by mechanical limits, but by those who feared what it could become. The underground community keeping the 292 alive. If you really want proof of what the 292 could do, you won't find it in GM's brochures. You'll find it on the dirt tracks of the Midwest. In the world of circle track racing, 2 modified race cars running 292 engines started gaining a serious reputation. They weren't flashy, but they were fast and nearly indestructible. Week after week, these cars delivered rock-solid reliability and torque-heavy performance that shocked even seasoned racers. What made the 292 stand out? Its smooth, linear power and perfectly balanced design gave it an edge, especially coming out of corners. While V8 struggled with traction, the 292 just hooked up and went. But not everybody was happy about it. The 292 guys were treated differently, recalled former dirt track racer Tom Miller. Tech inspectors would tear our engines down every week, convinced we were cheating. They just couldn't believe a straight 6 was running with, and sometimes beating, the V8s. And perhaps that's the most telling part of the story. Despite all this real-world success, the 292 was completely absent from GM's official factory racing efforts. It wasn't because it didn't perform. Internal memos, now kept in private collections, showed that GM's own tests with 6-cylinder race prototypes were promising. But there was a clear directive from above. Focus on V8s. Period. Even when the 292 proved itself on the track, GM kept the spotlight locked on the engines that fit their marketing playbook. The 292's racing story didn't die because it failed. It was ignored because it succeeded in ways GM wasn't ready to admit. The collector's secret: a hidden engine economy. Ever wonder why the 292's racing history is almost never mentioned in official GM materials or motorsport archives? There's a reason for that, and it's not by accident. The truth is uncomfortable. The 292 wasn't just impressive for a 6-cylinder. It was a genuine threat to the V8 empire that GM had spent millions of dollars building up and marketing to the world. A 6-cylinder engine that could out-torque and outlast certain V8s? That was bad for business, and so it was erased from the official story. But you can't bury greatness forever. The Chevrolet 292 has become a kind of automobile contraband, quietly traded, closely guarded, and passionately protected by a growing underground community of collectors and gearheads who know exactly what GM tried to suppress. While muscle car V8s bring big money and headlines at auctions, a shadow market is thriving for untouched, original 292 engines, especially those still in the vehicles they were born in. These aren't just collectors, they're believers. What drives this underground economy? One word: knowledge. The people who understand the 292's true potential search for them with an almost religious obsession. They speak in code, communicate through niche forums, and keep a low profile to avoid driving up prices or attracting attention. It's a secret society of sorts, not built on bragging rights, but on preserving what GM tried to erase. Fleet tests and the hunt for the Holy Grail. We don't talk about them at mainstream shows, says veteran collector Robert Mercer. When you find something with a clean 292, there's this knowing nod. We're keepers of a secret Detroit wanted buried. And for these 292 hunters, one prize sits above all others: the elusive code 292 SLE. But even that has a deeper layer, a mystery that fuels the most intense searches in this hidden world. Between 1973 and 1974, GM quietly conducted a fleet testing program that most people have never heard of. Roughly 350 high-output 292 engines, believed to be factory-enhanced variants, were installed into otherwise standard Chevy C10 pickups and distributed to a small group of commercial customers. These weren't marked with bold badges or performance decals. The only giveaway, a tiny, easy-to-miss code on the build sheet, ES6. That subtle code is now a symbol of legend. To collectors in the know, finding one of these ES6 trucks is like discovering buried treasure. They are the holy grail of the 292 world. Not just rare, but loaded with factory secrets and performance potential that never went public. And in garages across the country, some of these trucks are still out there, untouched, unmodified, waiting to be found by the few who know what they're looking for. Because in this world, owning a 292 SLE isn't just about horsepower, it's about being part of a forgotten chapter in American automotive history. Modern resurrection, unlocking the 292's true power. What makes the 292 community different isn't just their love for the engine, it's their secrecy. Unlike typical car enthusiasts who proudly display their builds, 292 collectors often do the opposite. Many go out of their way to hide what they have, installing incorrect valve covers, generic air cleaners, anything to keep curious eyes from spotting the truth. It's not about showing off, one longtime collector told me, asking to remain anonymous. It's about preserving something rare, something GM tried to erase. Every original 292 we rescue is like pushing back against decades of corporate censorship. And that mission is starting to catch fire. Across the country, in home garages and custom shops, a new generation of gearheads is waking up to what the 292 truly is: an untapped legend, buried by politics, not engineering. What GM never planned for, and definitely never wanted, is now happening. The 292 is back, and this time, it's unleashed. The final vindication and legacy of the banned engine. Today's technology is finally unlocking what GM tried to suppress. With modern fuel injection systems, CNC machined parts, and cutting-edge turbocharging, the once muted 292 is becoming the powerhouse it was always meant to be. We're getting over 450 horsepower out of turbocharged 292s, and that's with stock bottom ends, says Jason Newcomb, owner of 6 Appeal Performance, a shop dedicated entirely to inline 6 builds. These engines were ridiculously overbuilt from the factory. GM knew exactly what they were doing. They just didn't want anyone else to know. And the more you dig into these engines, the clearer the picture becomes. Why did a truck motor come with 7 main bearings, forged internals, and thick cylinder walls? Why was its oiling system designed for loads it was never supposed to see? The answer becomes obvious the moment modern builders strip away GM's factory restrictions. Perhaps the most telling sign of it all is how the 292 responds to a modern camshaft. With just a few upgrades, no exotic parts needed, the torque curve transforms completely. On the dyno, these engines start pulling hard in the mid-range and don't let up, outperforming many modern V8s where it counts. Real-world, usable power. The 292's rebirth isn't just a win for performance, it's vindication. The Chevy 292 Inline 6 is more than a forgotten power plant. It's a symbol of what happens when corporate strategy wins over engineering brilliance. But thanks to collectors, racers, and modern builders, the truth is finally out. GM may have buried the 292's legacy, but it didn't kill it. Today, its roar is louder than ever. This is Car Classic Archive. Subscribe and join us as we uncover the engines they never wanted you to know about.